The original handwritten manuscript for this part of Joseph Smith's history reads exactly like the Deseret News, quote, "I received the first visitation of angels," end quote. Manuscript History, Book B1, page 642. In addition to this, Joseph Smith's 1835-36 diary, page 37, provides supporting evidence for the word angels. I received the first visitation of angels. The fact that Mormon historians had to make such a serious change in Joseph Smith's history after his death tends further to weaken the case for the first vision. Not unique. The Mormon writer Paul R. Cheeseman says that, quote, Joseph Smith's account is unique in that the Father and the Son appeared together and they both spoke. To those who accept the Bible and the Book of Mormon as authentic, nowhere in these histories do we have another example that parallels this experience in this respect, end quote. An analysis of the accounts relating Joseph Smith's early visions, page 18. Now that we have Joseph Smith's first account of his vision, which only mentions Christ as appearing, we know that his claim was not unique. Many people were making similar claims. For instance, in 1816 a minister by the name of Elias Smith published a book in which he told of his conversion. Notice how similar it is to Joseph Smith's first account. I went into the woods. A light appeared from heaven. My mind seemed to rise in that light to the throne of God and the Lamb. The Lamb once slain appeared to my understanding, and while viewing him, I felt such love to him as I never felt to anything earthly. It is not possible for me to tell how long I remained in that situation. The life, conversion, preaching, travels, and sufferings of Elias Smith, Portsmouth, N.H., 1816, pages 58-59. Alexander Campbell wrote the following on March 1, 1824, concerning a revival in the state of New York: enthusiasm flourishes. This man was regenerated when asleep, by a vision of the night. That man heard a voice in the woods, saying, "Thy sins be forgiven thee." A third saw his Savior descending to the tops of the trees at noonday. The Christian Baptist, Volume 1, pages 148-49. Wilde claimed to have a revelation which is very similar to the story Joseph Smith published. It was published in the Wayne Sentinel, the paper to which the family of Joseph Smith apparently subscribed, on October 22, 1823, quote, "It seemed as if my mind was struck motionless, as well as into nothing, before the awful and glorious majesty of the great Jehovah. He then spake. He also told me, that every denomination of professing Christians had become extremely corrupt." End quote. It is plain to see, then, that the story Joseph Smith penned in the early 1830s is not much different than the visions related by others. It was only when he added the part about the Father appearing with the Son that the story began to sound unique. First history. In the early years of the Mormon Church, the members were taught that the first vision Joseph Smith had was in 1823 when he was 17 years of age, and that the personage who appeared was an angel, not God the Father and his Son Jesus Christ, who told him about the Book of Mormon. Oliver Cowdery, one of the three witnesses to the Book of Mormon and the first church historian, wrote a history of Mormonism which was published in the Messenger and Advocate, the official church organ at that time. This history shows that the story of the visit of the Father and the Son was not taught to the Mormon people. Francis W. Kirkham, in his book A New Witness for Christ in America, Volume 1, page 17, says, "The first published consecutive account of the origin of the Church began in the October, 1834, issue of the Messenger and Advocate. It consists of 8 letters written by Oliver Cowdery to W. W. Phelps. This account is very important as Oliver Cowdery claims in a letter published in the October, 1834, issue, but dated September 7, 1834, that Joseph Smith assisted him in the writing of the letters. The Messenger and Advocate, Volume 1, page 13, said that it would be a full history of the rise of the Church, and on page 42 of the same volume we read that it would contain a correct statement of events. In the February, 1835, issue of the Messenger and Advocate, Oliver Cowdery told how Joseph Smith made his first contact with God. You will recollect that I mentioned the time of a religious excitement, in Palmyra and vicinity, to have been in the 15th year of our brother J. Smith Jr.'s age. That was an error in the type, it should have been in the 17th. You will please remember this correction, as it will be necessary for the full understanding of what will follow in time. This would bring the date down to the year 1823. While this excitement continued, he continued to call upon the Lord in secret for a full manifestation of divine approbation, and for, to him, the all-important information, if a supreme being did exist, to have an assurance that he was accepted of him. On the evening of the 21st of September, 1823, previous to retiring to rest, our brother's mind was unusually wrought up on the subject which had so long agitated his mind. His heart was drawn out in fervent prayer. While continuing in prayer for a manifestation, on a sudden a light like that of day burst into the room, and in a moment a personage stood before him. He heard him declare himself to be a messenger sent by commandment of the Lord, to deliver a special message, and to witness to him that his sins were forgiven. Messenger and Advocate, Volume 1, pages 78 to 79. Several things should be noted concerning this history. First, that it was supposed to be a correct account. Second, that Joseph Smith assisted in the writing. Third, that the date of the religious excitement in Palmyra was 1823. Fourth, that Joseph Smith desired to know at this time if a supreme being did exist. Fifth, that a messenger sent by commandment of the Lord appeared to him and told him that his sins were forgiven. If the reader examines this account carefully, he will see that it is absolutely impossible to reconcile it with Joseph Smith's later story that he saw the Father and the Son in 1820. A doctrinal change prior to the time Paul Cheeseman wrote his thesis at Brigham Young University. Mormon writers were emphatically proclaiming that Joseph Smith told but one story of the first vision. Now that the strange accounts of the first vision have been printed and widely circulated, Mormon apologists are forced to admit their existence and authenticity. They will not, however, face the serious implications of the differences in the accounts. Dr. Truman G. Madsen, of Brigham Young University, even goes so far as to say that we are impressed with their harmony considering the very different circumstances of their writing. Brigham Young University Studies, Spring 1969, page 240. When Lawrence G. Peterson, research supervisor at the Church Historian's Office, was asked concerning the different accounts of the first vision, he wrote a letter in which he stated, "We are not concerned really with which of the two versions of the first vision is right. Personally I would take the version which the prophet Joseph gave himself when he stated that he saw two personages. Regardless whether he saw one or two, the fact remains that Jesus Christ is mentioned in both of them." It is obvious from this statement that some Mormon apologists are beginning to retreat from the idea that God the Father appeared to Joseph Smith. This is actually a very important matter, because Mormon leaders have used this vision as evidence for their doctrine of a plurality of gods. They have stated that this vision proves that God and Christ are two distinct personages and that they both have a body. They use the first vision to prove that God himself is only an exalted man. George Q. Cannon, who was a member of the first presidency of the Mormon Church, declared in 1883, "There was no man scarcely upon the earth that had a true conception of God." But all this was swept away in one moment by the appearance of God, the Father, and his Son Jesus Christ, to the boy Joseph. The Father came accompanied by the Son, thus showing that there were two personages of the Godhead. Joseph saw that the Father had a form, that he had a head, that he had arms, that he had limbs, that he had feet, that he had a face and a tongue. Journal of Discourses, Volume 24, pages 371 to 72. Apostle Legrand Richards states, "This was the prophet's first vision. From this we learn among other truths, that God the Father and his Son, Jesus Christ, are separate and distinct personages, and that man is literally created in the image of God, a marvelous work and a wonder, 1966, page 12. 10th President, Joseph Fielding Smith said that there is no account in history or revelation extant, wherever before both the Father and the Son appeared in the presence of mortal man in glory, Essentials in Church History, pages 46 to 47. Apostle John A. Witt so stated, "It was an extraordinary experience. Never before had God the Father and God the Son appeared to mortal man." Joseph Smith, Seeker After Truth, page 4. Actually, the fact that the first written account of the first vision only mentioned one personage is consistent with what Joseph Smith believed about God when he wrote the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon, which was first published in 1830, taught that there was but one God. And now Abinadi said unto them, I would that ye should understand that God himself shall come down among the children of men, and shall redeem his people. And because he dwelleth in flesh he shall be called the Son of God, and having subjected the flesh to the will of the Father, being the Father and the Son. And thus the flesh becoming subject to the Spirit, or the Son to the Father, being one God. Book of Mormon, Mosiah chapter 15 verses 1, 2 and 5. The Book of Mormon tells of a visitation of the Father and the Son to the brother of Jerald. The Father and the Son mentioned, however, are not two separate personages. Only one personage appears, and this personage says, Behold, I am he who was prepared from the foundation of the world to redeem my people. Behold, I am Jesus Christ. I am the Father and the Son. In me shall all mankind have light. Ether chapter 3 verse 14. The Book of Mormon clearly teaches that God the Father is a spirit, and the first edition of the Doctrine and Covenants also contained a reference which stated that God is a spirit. It would appear, then, that Joseph Smith did not believe that God the Father had a body at the time he wrote his first account of the vision in the wilderness. Towards the end of his life, however, he changed his mind and decided that God was just an exalted man. Consequently, he revised his story of the vision to include the Father after he had changed his mind about the Godhead. Marvin S. Hill, of the BYU History Department, seems willing to admit this, although he is still unwilling to concede that this shows fraud on Joseph Smith's part. Brody's assumption of a deceitful prophet was supported by her discovery that early Mormons did not relate the first vision story consistently, and, as she maintained in 1945, the earliest version by the prophet was not written until 1838. She has had to revise the argument somewhat since it is now known that the earliest account extant was written in 1832. But there are, undeniably, differences in the several accounts, not all of them minor from the standpoint of Mormon theology. To focus upon the discrepancies touching the personages of the Godhead in the first vision story, whether one or two personages, is to concentrate on a theological question and to miss its historical significance. Brody and others have been preoccupied with the first vision's theological implications, which were the product of Joseph Smith's and the Mormon people's later thinking. This has caused them to miss the important implications as to the social and religious origins of Mormonism, which may be the essential point. If over the years Joseph's conception of the Godhead changed, this is not evidence of fraud any more than the adaptation of other aspects of his theology in later years proves to be. Dialogue, A Journal of Mormon Thought, Winter 1972, pages 78 to 79. Anti-Mormon writers have pointed out that after Joseph Smith's death the Mormon leaders made some very confusing statements concerning the first vision. Now that we have Joseph Smith's first written accounts of the vision, we are able to understand why they were in such a state of confusion. Wesley P. Walters states, the shift from an angel to Christ, then to angels, and finally to two personages introduced such haziness that even the Mormon leaders appeared confused as to the nature of the story itself. Dialogue, A Journal of Mormon Thought, Spring 1969, page 73.